Hello everybody and welcome to the Human Echoes recap for Channel Zero, Butcher's Block, Episode 1. This one's called Insidious, Onset. And if you're not familiar with the Channel Zero format, these are taken from creepypastas. We've had 2 seasons so far. We started off with the Candle Cove, which I was okay with. And then they moved on to No End House, which I really liked. And that's an opinion that's pretty much opposite of how the Channel Zero community feels, but that's how I feel. And now we're kicking into Butcher's Block. Now, Butcher's Block is the first one that we have that's not directly based on one of these stories that people have submitted to various forums throughout the internet. It's inspired by the Search and Rescue creepypasta, which I did read when I found out that they were sort of spinning it off of that, which is an excellent story. But really, the only element they're taking from Search and Rescue is these creepy staircases that just appear and are creepy, and you're not supposed to go by them, and everything else is kind of an original creation of the showrunners here. And we start off with the story about one of these staircases, and I like this format because we know up front that this is possibly tainted information, right? This is a guy telling this girl this weirdly specific urban legend about this couple, like teenagers that are walking through the park and they see a staircase and then one of them gets killed. And there's that like level of, okay, well that's a weird story, but I don't have to believe that because it's just a story this guy's telling. Like, people have weird stories all over the place. And yet, when you're watching it, man, I've been creeped out by a lot of stuff in the Channel Zero oeuvre, okay? The various stuff that they've put out. The first episode, for instance, of No End House, that had wonderfully creepy things. There's some really neat effects and images that you would see in Candle Cove. But here in Butcher's Block, the image of this little imp, I'm gonna call him, okay? A dude in a robe with some kind of messed up face, all right? It's not a human face at all. And the way he moves just doesn't feel right. And everything about that screamed to me, I know this guy. I know this character. This is the character from your dreams that sits at the end of the bed, and if you dangle your toes off, he's right there with some gardening shears ready to clip your little pinky toe off. So you gotta keep your toes on the bed or this guy's coming for you. And they cast him in this show. I don't know where they got him, alright? His agent must be super busy. But man, was I not okay. Just any time a tiny person with the robe was on screen, and there was a lot of times. There was a lot of times when there was a small person and they was wearing a robe and moving creepy, and I have no problem with like little people, okay? Just like in normal clothes and normal circumstances, but in this circumstance, these monsters are just, they just push the button, all right? I get that that's like totally subjective and that might not work for everybody, but almost immediately off the bat, I was just like in a, I can't, I'm okay, no, I can't kind of situation with this show. We do get then, after they've just totally taken my nerves apart, we get into the story. We find out that the guy telling the story and the girl, they're sort of co-workers. She's just newly moved to this town. She's going to be a social worker, helping people kind of navigate the system of, welfare and child protective services and trying to, get their rights that they have, which is a admirable goal. And she's come here with her sister Zoe. The main girl from the beginning was Allison, and her and Zoe are here. And we also find out that they've left their mom behind somewhere. She calls Allison early on in the episode and says to her, "Where did you guys go? Why didn't you, I'm trying to get with you, but I couldn't, and I missed your birthday." she's having, and it becomes clear throughout the conversation that she is in some kind of mental institution. And she keeps repeating the words, "I wasn't myself." I think she says that at least 3 times. We don't know what happened. We don't know what specific thing that these girls are running away from, but clearly the mom has some mental issues. And on top of that, Allie is trying to protect her sister Zoe, who also has similar mental issues. And this is where we get the title of the episode, right? Where she talks about how when she turned 26, it wasn't like an all of a sudden thing. The Insidious onset. I looked it up. I checked. It is an actual mental health term to describe sort of just a gradual accumulation of symptoms that add up to a thing, but don't start out like, because sometimes you'll just have an incident where all of a sudden now, like, I saw a bad thing happen, now I have PTSD, or I got whacked in the head and now I have short-term memory loss or whatever. And this isn't like that. This is an accumulation of things that get bigger and bigger and bigger, and she's trying to deal with it, and the way she's trying to deal with it is drugs and alcohol. This overarching structure, I think, is very, very reminiscent of what we saw in No End House. The 2 characters in No End House were someone who was dealing with an extreme amount of grief, all right, and guilt, and another character who wanted to help but was afraid to get too close lest she be sucked in by those issues. All right, and we're having a similar issue here. I think they've sort of flip-flopped the main character dynamic, where Jules was the best friend, and she was sort of not the main person to start with, although they kind of co-starred. But in No End House, you had a similar character dynamic, and here you have not someone who's run away, because Allie is taking Zoe with her to this new town. She's trying to help her, but she can't bring herself to totally commit, because in Allie's mind, she's somewhat susceptible to this mental danger as well. And she thinks that, I mean, she's about to turn 26. It was 26 when her sister started having these problems. Apparently, her mom was 26 when she started having problems. So these symptoms, she's afraid, are going to start showing up. And of course, she's just showed up in like the weirdest town ever, which is Butcher's Block. And our first introduction to the town, really, what we have the guy and the girl drive through kind of the low rent area, and it's sort of a ghetto, just typical trash-y neighborhood, all right, where the people have been forgotten. I mean, they pretty much spell out, like, forgotten by, not forgotten, like, you can still call the cops there, but it's dangerous to go there. You know, the cops probably aren't like hanging out just looking for stuff to find, because there's so much there to find, they would just be there all day. It's sort of just like, okay, we're just going to let that area rot, and we're going to cut it off, all right? We're just going to amputate those people and let them go off on their own, and maybe we can save the rest of the town. That is Butcher's Block in a nutshell, but to me, the craziness of it is really introduced when they first meet Scissors Lady, which was another thing. I think it's just the delivery here. Like, I don't have any problem with scissors, but the way that this woman talked about the scissors and talked about the bindings on her hands was, especially with the payoff later, was really, really creepy. I was unsettled by her like holding up her hands, and they've got these black gloves on them, and she's asking them, do you have any scissors? Like, she almost sounds normal. She's almost okay. She's like, you wouldn't run away from this person immediately. She approaches them on the street, and she seems fine, and they're fine to talk to her. They think maybe this is the landlady, because they haven't met anybody yet. And it only, as she keeps going, becomes apparent that there's just something a little bit off. And then, of course, the landlady chases her off. And when she comes back, she has the scissors in her hand, and now she's just... This lady really doesn't need to have scissors. It's bad. Before we get to the scissor attack, I did want to shout out to the landlady, who I think is interesting here, just sort of trying to unpack thematically what's going on in this show. There's an interaction that happens a couple times where Allie tries to talk to the landlady, whose name I've forgotten. I didn't write it down. He tries to kind of confide in her and let her know, like, here's who we are, like, here's what our deal is. And she's not a mean person, right? But she is very much not interested in being involved at all. She just wants to get the rent and to have the house and, like, treat these people as basic human beings but not have to deal with them. And the thing is, she's gone through some stuff herself. Like, we find out that she has a backstory with this whole weirdness or whatever, where her brother disappeared in Butcher's Block, and she's investigating his disappearance, and she's a journalist, or at least used to be, but she has become callous to the problems of others. And I think that there's a sense in which she represents sort of society at large to these girls, where she's not hostile towards them. She just doesn't care to help at all. She's not their mom, which she says, like, outright, like, I'm not a mom. I don't want kids. I don't want to deal with your nonsense. I have got my nonsense to deal with, so pay the rent and get out of my face. And really, like, she does that several times, where it's like, if you're paying the rent, I don't care. Like, don't come to me with your problems. It's just the money. That's all I want. And you can kind of see them, maybe a poke at capitalism, at least capitalism in the raw here, that has let all these other people down, and it's about to let these two girls down too. In the meantime, Allie goes to the house of her first job, like very first visit as far as we can tell, where she's working on her social worker job. This lady's about to have CPS come and take her girl away. I liked how ambiguous it was. At least it was ambiguous to me whether or not, like, she didn't seem like a good mom. Okay, it wasn't like, man, this lady's really killing it, but we didn't super see a lot of evidence of direct abuse either. We only know that her daughter showed up with some kind of bite. The mom said it's a dog bite. Apparently the girl had some kind of story about what bit her that the mom does not elaborate on, and we don't hear specifically about. But the more interesting thing is, while they're in the house, we cut to the inside of a hollow wall. Actually, it turns out to be like this giant, if you look at how the shot tracks when she's looking down the hallway, because she hears some of these rustling sounds in the walls, it's like a big room inside what I assume is not a big apartment. It's just walled off, and there's some creepy bald, another little person inside the wall right behind where Allie's sitting, licking the wall. And Allie does not hear the licking, but she does hear something happening in the wall and goes to investigate, talks to the little girl for a little bit, sees a big hole in the wall, like decides she's going to investigate a little bit more. And in the process of this, her and the other dude social worker get locked in this room, and all of a sudden there's screaming happening, and when they get out, the little girl and their mom is gone. Her mom is gone. And when the police come, I felt like the Alley was being a little bit hard on the police, because I was 100% like, I get why they think that the mom just bolted, because of course she did. Like, I know you and I know that she didn't, because it's a TV show, and like we know that there's weird stuff and people are gonna disappear, but like in real world, yeah, she left. Like 99% chance that's probably what happened. She didn't want her kid taken, because moms don't like having their daughter snatched away from them, even if they're not great at being moms. And so it's like she left. Of course, Allie knows that this is not what happened, and the detail that it was only the mom screaming, I think, is really interesting. In my head, I'm forming this narrative of like the little girl colluding with the little bald dude in the wall, and like the mom being taken away or something. I don't know where that's going, but I'm interested. But Allie needs to find out, right? She believes that this little girl's still in danger. She's not just with her mom. So she does what she thinks the cops should be doing and goes to Butcher's Block at night, which is not a great move. She does take her sister, though. Like, the dude Allie's working with tells her, like, don't come here at night. Don't come here alone. She breaks the rule of coming there at night, and it's justified, all right? I was in the subreddit for this show. I was reading some of the stuff some people were saying, and somebody was criticizing, like, yeah, typical horror movie person. You're told not to do the thing, and you go do the thing. But she's trying to help a little girl who she thinks is in danger. Like, she believes she's probably by this lady tree. Time is probably of the essence if something's happened to her. So I'm going to cut Allie some slack for coming back to Butcher's Block at night. However, she doesn't get rewarded for it. She does meet up with Scissors Lady again, and Scissors Lady has scissors now, and just she wants to help him out so bad with those scissors. She's gonna cut off all the things that tie him down. Okay, that scene, not as bad as the little person scene, but really did kind of unsettle me. They get away, they run into the house, which is maybe for me like the most what moment of this whole thing, where like they go into the house of the woman whose daughter was taken. I guess it was just there. It was a convenient thing, but it seemed like, I don't know that I would just bust into somebody else's house at night in Butcher's Block. But they do, and eventually they get split up. Zoe sees another one of these little people, chases it down, sees the lady tree, and then chases it some more and sees the stairs again. And what should come down the stairs, but what I'm going to steal from the Reddit thread that I read about this. Somebody had the amazing insight to call this thing Meet 3PO. Because it's probably a fairly restrictive suit, and it just kind of moves like this, but it's just a meat dude. It's a dude made out of meat. Which is weird. But there's also another one of these little dudes, and this dude's different. Like, this dude's face is not all masky. We get a close-up of this one, and it's almost like a baby face, but then there's like something wrong with the eye, and it's got a meat cleaver too. That so far they've all had meat cleavers. I don't think I mentioned it at the beginning. But it's gonna attack Zoe, and then the meat thing takes it away. Meanwhile, Allie goes looking for her sister, meets up with, at the lady tree that the little girl mentioned, and when she finds the lady tree, she meets up with this guy who says his name is Joseph. And Joseph lives around here, and he's not worried about walking around at night, and he seems perfectly nice, except for the fact that he's just a dapper gentleman out in the middle of the night in a terrible neighborhood in an overgrown playground. Other than that, this dude seems perfectly normal. And he says he lives nearby. She kind of just accepts it and goes on, looks for Zoe. Zoe's like, this place is messed up. They got meat people. They got dwarves in red robes. We're leaving. I'm leaving. If you're not leaving, I'm leaving. I will get on a bus. I'm gone. It's so, this is the most relatable and realistic thing that could happen in this show, where she's just like, saw a weird thing? I'm out. I'm done. I've seen stuff on drugs. I realize that I have problems with my brain. This is not that. This is real, and it's bad, and we bye now. Bye-bye. And she leaves. She does. She goes to the bus stop. And, of course, Allie has another one of these confrontations, isn't exactly the right word, but has another conversation with her landlady, who tells her about the project that she's working on, trying to find her brother, trying to figure out what's happening. It's sort of the standard, people have gone missing for years, but they're transient, so no one noticed. I don't know why I made her sound like, I don't know, Optimus Prime, but you get the sort of standard horror movie backstory. Candyman is the one that comes to mind here, where, people disappear, but they're not important people from an important part of town, so nobody cares. It's that kind of setup. But then she starts asking about the local sort of scene, and the landlady tells her about the Peach Meat Company. Peach Meat, by the way, I love the juxtaposition of those two words. The fact that you have peach, which is a very sweet, juicy, Like it has a skin, but you don't think like it's a fruit. Like it's a fruit. And then you have meat, which is not. It's a different thing than fruit. The juxtaposition of those two words together is just so wonderfully odd. It fits perfectly in this universe, I feel. But she mentions this guy who was the founder of this meatpacking plants who at some point, like 50 years ago, disappeared. And, you know, like, Allie looks at his picture, and it's the dude she met in the park. It's the same. It's not like older, all right? Because he was already pretty old. He's just standard. This is how old he is, and he stayed that old somehow forever, or for 50 years. And, of course, that's a big dun-dun-dun moment, capped off with Zoe at the bus stop. Zoe at the bus stop. No, Zoe at the bus stop, and she's sitting there waiting for the bus, about to get out of town, and who should show up but old Mr. Joseph Peach, apparently immortal, and just sits down next to Allie. And that's the end of the episode. I know a lot of people's issue with No End House was that we got a lot of really interesting, scary stuff at the beginning, and then it just kind of turned into a character-driven escape caper. I loved it, okay? But I think people wanted more drawn-out, creepy stuff with No End House, and it seems like we can get that here. I think, for me, the original Candle Cove was kind of just a barrage of creepy imagery that was attached to characters that I didn't particularly care about. Maybe that's a me problem. And when we got to No End House, I was invested in the characters, and I didn't care so much that the creepy imagery wasn't as hyped up as it was in Candle Cove. But if they do their job right, I think we can get a good marriage of those two, because I like the character motivations that we have going on here in this series, and it seems like we have the opportunity to really stretch out a lot of the weirdness and the creepiness throughout, you know, all the episodes of the season. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they do that. Stay tuned. Maybe I'll hate it and you'll love it, or maybe you'll love it and I'll hate it, or maybe we'll both all love it together. But that's it. That's all I've got for this week. I may continue recapping these, but I may not. It really depends on my schedule. I would like to, but there's some stuff that it has filled up things recently. I definitely wanted to get on the first episode and kind of touch base with y'all. I know I recapped all the No End House, and I know some of you may be expecting this. So if you were looking for an Albert recap, here's an Albert recap. I'm Albert, and I'm recapping at least the first episode. We'll see how it goes from here. I'm not making any promises, but, you know, subscribe, tune in next week. Maybe we'll have some more. I hope we do. And I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, click that like button. As I said, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys next week. Take care, y'all.